You're checking in with the doctor for your daily fantasy football update.
Oh, yeah.
The best thoughts, opinions, advice, and random fantasy talk in the biz.
You heard the man.
So here he is, your host of Doc's Office, Dr. Fantasy himself, Jordan Jaika.
Jordan Jaika.
What's cracking, everybody? Decided to do a midday lunch live here. You are checking in with the doctor, Dr. Fantasy here, Jordan Jaika. Today we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite player from 2018 because as fantasy football owners, all we do is live in the past. That's 99% of the fun. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Kerryon Johnson, who was released by the Detroit Lions yesterday. A lot of people loved Kerryon Johnson, and it was only 1 year ago, if you remember, that we were concerned with DeAndre Swift landing in Detroit because of Kerryon Johnson, and how silly that looks now. I mean, it was always a little bit silly. DeAndre Swift looked incredible at Georgia, had all the makings of a three-down back. Kerryon Johnson's had some moments, but I think we like to cling on to those small moments of fantasy production as fantasy owners. So we're going to talk a little bit about Kerryon Johnson, where he could potentially land. Make sure you subscribe to Doc's Office on YouTube. You can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I'll be posting this later on with all. If you missed this live. So let's get into it. Where do we see Kerryon Johnson landing in 2021? Kerryon Johnson, very rarely do we see a 23-year-old running back on the free agent market. When you look at the guys that are available right now, you have Todd Gurley still hanging around, which I've been very vocal in saying his career is over, so don't get too excited when he ends up signing somewhere. Le'Veon Bell still on the market, so you have some viable backups, and that's all that I see Kerryon Johnson being at this point. As fantasy owners, if you own him in a dynasty format, your best case scenario is he goes somewhere where they don't have a strong backfield behind their starter, because I'm sorry, Kerryon Johnson's not a starting running back in this league, folks. I'm sorry to break that news to you on a Thursday afternoon if you are a big Kerryon Johnson fan, but this is not a guy that's a starting caliber running back in the NFL. So his biggest year came in 2018, where a lot of us fantasy owners got hope. Had a decent year, 850 yards total in 10 games, 5.3 yards per carry. One of the things that I was looking at when I was looking at potential landing spots was who was his offensive coordinator and his running backs coach during his most successful year. If it tells you anything, Jim Bob Cooter, best name for a coordinator ever, was his offensive coordinator in 2018. He's out of the NFL for what that's worth right now. And his running backs coach, I believe it was David Walker was his name. He is also out of the NFL currently. So maybe that tells you all you need to know about that. But Kerryon, overall 23 years old, 1,700 career yards, up and down. We know he's dealt with injuries. He's only averaged a little over 11 games per season over his 3-year career thus far. So last year he played, technically he was active for all 16 games, which was a first. He only ended up playing in 14 of them. And we'll talk a little bit about why that was. Had a 20% opportunity share in Detroit last season. One of the things that I think is a little concerning is that I think a lot of us have him pegged as a third down back, but he really hasn't been that effective in the passing game itself. Now, he's been an effective pass blocker, which I'll talk about, but he hasn't been overly effective as a receiving running back. So last season, he had the 79th highest opportunity share, so, not very high. But he had the 9th worst drop rate. So he had a little bit of a case of the dropsies last season, which isn't promising if he wants to catch on as a third down back somewhere. I don't really necessarily see him in that mold as a pass catching option anyway. Now, where it gets a little bit interesting, and maybe a lot of people don't know this about him, but in 2020, even though his playing time wasn't significant, he had the 4th highest pass block rating according to Pro Football Focus. So that's an interesting, underrated part of Kerryon Johnson's game that we don't talk about. We were all enamored with his potential fantasy production. I don't necessarily see that happening again. However, I do see him catching on with the team because he has a lot of value as a pass blocker. And, when you look across the NFL, there's a lot of teams that are in need of that pass blocking element from a running back. So let's talk about some of the landing spots. I threw this out in the Fantasy Mafia chat last night. I threw a few options in here as well. To me, there's one ideal landing spot, both in a real life and a fantasy perspective, from a fantasy standpoint perspective. So let's jump into one of those. One of the first ones that was thrown out, the New York Giants. They did bring in Devontae Booker, who looked decent with the Raiders last season, but I think this is an opportunity where he could potentially carve out a role. I think Devontae Booker and Kirian are similar kinds of running backs. Kirian is a better pass protector, so I think he would have more value on third downs and in passing situations for the Giants. But if Barkley went down, Zach Carlson also said in the comments the Falcons, which will definitely be one of the landing spots that we talk about. So the Giants, to me, not ideal, especially behind Barkley, because if Barkley stays healthy, he's going to have one of the highest opportunity shares in the NFL. So you're relying on Saquon to get injured, and that's not ideal, although it could happen. And even if Saquon did go down, you'd probably be looking at a Devontae Booker, Kerryon Johnson split backfield, which really isn't ideal for anybody. So another one, this one comes from me more, the Chargers. I know people are still enamored with Justin Jackson, Josh Kelly. They brought in Roundtree this year as a rookie. So another name in the mix. But I'm going to be honest with you, I was not impressed with Justin Jackson or Josh Kelly last season. I think Kirian has more potential than both of them. Austin Eckler is more of a receiving back out of the backfield, so they could potentially bring in Kirian to be more of a pass protector on those downs while they split Austin Eckler out wide to be more of a pass protect or a receiving threat out of the backfield. So I personally think Kirian has more upside and would offer them a better backup than Jackson or Kelly. So I think that's an option. Once again, not ideal. Another one, and I guess I'll talk about the Falcons now since Caveman Zach Carlson himself is gracing me with his presence. The Falcons, I think, would be a really interesting landing spot. I think Kirian is a little bit Mike Davis-esque. Mike Davis now in Atlanta, probably going to be the starter. Not much competition. They didn't bring anyone in via the draft. Quadri Olison, Cordero Patterson are still there. Can't see them taking touches. Javeon Hawkins, they signed as a unsigned or undrafted free agent. That's an intriguing name that a lot of people are excited about in dynasty formats. Everybody's calling him the next James Robinson. I'm not that optimistic. I think Hawkins could definitely carve out a nice third down role, but I don't know if it's anything beyond that. But yeah, I mean, if you're figuring Mike Davis takes 60% of the backfield touches, I think Kirian could come in and be an effective third down back for the Falcons. We know that's going to be a really strong passing game with Matt Ryan and the boys that he's throwing to out there. Kyle Pitts, Julio, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst. Don't forget about that, man. He's still there. A lot of 2 tight end sets with Arthur Smith coming into Atlanta. So I do think the Falcons are an interesting option because I think he would be a better pass protector in that offense than Quadri Olison, Cordero Patterson, Javeon Hawkins. So I think Atlanta is would be one of my top 2 or 3 landing spots. I have 2 others that I really like, but I really like the Atlanta landing spot. I think that would make a lot of sense for him to be a part of a offense that should be really high octane and offer some potential for him to have value in year 1. So I think that's an ideal situation for him. Other landing spots, the Steelers were brought up. I'm not overly high on that one. They do still have Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, Kalen Ballage they brought in. Ballage actually looked pretty decent with the Chargers last year. I'm not going to lie. I thought he looked like a complete dud in Miami, but if you watched him, he was running with a purpose in LA. So I do think he is a little, not a threat to Najee Harris, but he'll have a small role there. So I think there's a lot of mouths to feed behind Najee Harris there. So I'm not optimistic that the Steelers are a great landing spot, but you can't deny that is a decent landing spot. The Seahawks, I think, are an interesting option. Chris Carson is back, and we've seen him get a little banged up. But behind him, Rashad Penny, they declined his option. They have Travis Homer, DJ Dallas. So Kirian could potentially be the top backup in Seattle. I don't think that's a bad option. The Panthers, they did bring up Chuba Hubbard. or that just drafted Hubbard. However, behind McCaffrey, how much production is there going to be? I think Hubbard is very Mike Davis-esque, so I think he's a perfect backup. Not sure how much of a role Kerryon would have there. And like I said, that's completely relying on Christian McCaffrey going down because that's his backfield. You have the Panthers, the Chiefs. They have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Damian Williams moved on, but they have Darrell Williams, Jerick McKinnon behind him. Yes, Jerick McKinnon is in Kansas City now, in case you didn't know that. But once again, if they don't want to give Helaire the full backfield touches, I think that could be an interesting landing spot for him. The Dolphins were brought up, Dolphins and Jets in that division. The Dolphins have several names there with Myles Gaskin, Salvon Ahmed, who had some decent games last year. Malcolm Brown they brought over from the Rams. Once again, if he was to go to Miami, I think it would be a four-headed monster because Malcolm Brown has shown value as a goal line back, and he's actually a decent pass protector as well. The Rams used him in that role pretty extensively last season. Salvon Ahmed, Gaskin showed some upside, so I feel like that would just be a cluttery mess. Same with the Jets. It looks like the Jets are going running back by committee here with Tevin Coleman, LaMichael Pirine, and Michael Carter. So I think he would just be a part of kind of that jumbled mess there. So my top three landing spots are Atlanta, and then I also have the Tennessee Titans, and I know some people aren't going to be excited about that, and I thought Darrington Evans was going to have more of a role last season. They did bring in Brian Hill from the Falcons as well, but I think Kerryon from day one could slot in behind Derrick Henry and be that second option that they need, a valuable pass protector for Ryan Tannehill. That offense is going to look a little different with Arthur Smith moving on. Probably not much different because Derrick Henry's the man, but I think the Titans would be my third best landing spot for Kerryon. I think he could have a 20, 25, 30% opportunity share with the Titans. So I have spot number 3 as the Titans. The Falcons I talked about previously. I think he would be a perfect third down back in Atlanta. And in case you missed it earlier, Kerryon Johnson in 2020 was the 4th best pass protector among running backs in the NFL. He played in 14 games, was active for 16 of them. So he actually has quite a bit of real life value, and real life value can equate to a small amount of fantasy value, which is what we're more concerned with. So the Falcons are my second option. My number one option, sorry, caveman, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this is too perfect. Not that Joe Mixon's going to lose his starting job to Kerryon Johnson, because anyone who thinks that does not watch football. But I do think when they lost Giovanni Bernard, they lost a very valuable pass protector. Joe Burrow had the 24th best pass protection rate in the NFL in 2020. That's a huge area of concern from them. They've brought in some linemen this offseason, and that line should be improved. But what better way to continue to build upon that? Sorry, caveman. What better way to build upon that than bringing in Giovanni Bernard has finished as a top 5 pass protector twice in his career, normally in that top 10 range. What better way to replace Giovanni Bernard than with Kerryon Johnson? Kerryon Johnson immediately would slot in that third down role. You'd probably see him have a 25 to 30% opportunity share. Not that that's ideal, but that's better than he was probably going to get with the Lions. And it's better than what he had last season as well. So I think the Cincinnati Bengals are ideal. It fits a need for them. Right now, they only have really Samaje Perine behind Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon's been a little banged up. Not that I'm holding that against him, but so to have a valuable running back that can pass protect for you, can fill in if Joe Mixon goes down, a guy that started some games, I think that's a perfect landing spot for Kerryon to not only have value now, but to have a little value potentially as Joe Mixon's handcuff. So that's what I got for you guys today. Coming on about that 15-minute mark. Apparently, I love talking about Kerryon Johnson. I have the Bengals, then the Falcons, and the Titans as the top 3 landing spots. We'll see where he lands in the next few weeks. Like I said, there are some valuable, decent backup handcuff options still on the free agent market, but Kerryon is the youngest of those options and arguably is the most valuable with that pass protecting skill. So thank you guys for tuning in to Doc's Office. Make sure you subscribe everywhere. I'll be posting this video later on. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out, Girl Scouts.